The new Zombies map, Mauer der Toten, was recently released on Cold War Zombies, and with the launch of this new map comes an abundance of new things to talk about. One of those things that I feel like is worth a discussion is the new wonder weapon called CRBR-S, which is just short for Cerberus. It's basically just a pistol, and it actually kind of reminds me of something like the Ray Gun Mark II, where the weapon is basically just a very powerful pistol. In that sense, this wonder weapon is actually very generic, but in another sense, it's also a very unique wonder weapon. This weapon can be upgraded to 3 different variants, and its uniqueness becomes very prominent only when you look at the relationship between the base version and its upgraded counterparts. It's really unlike anything we've ever had in Zombies, and it's interesting to see how Treyarch managed to change things up so much by doing something very simple that just hadn't been done before. So basically, the way you obtain this wonder weapon is that you just have to do some mini fetch quests, nothing out of the ordinary. It's just the usual standard setup process that you normally see in a Zombies map. You open some safe and you get the wonder weapon, so nothing out of the ordinary there. But let's talk about the upgrade process. Well, there is none. To upgrade this weapon, you just have to kill zombies with it, and eventually one of the zombies will just simply drop one of the 3 upgrades as mod kits, and all you have to do is pick it up and now your wonder weapon is upgraded. It's that simple, but the thing that you're gonna notice right off the bat is that these upgrades don't seem to have a lot of ammo, and it's that way for a reason. There are 3 main reasons why these upgrades don't have a lot of ammo. One is that as long as you keep killing the zombies with this weapon, no matter which variant, there's always a chance that the zombies you kill are gonna drop a new variant, or they'll drop the same variant, which basically counts as a max ammo. 2 is that with the release of the new Mule Kick perk, now there's a small chance that the zombies are gonna drop some ammo. And the 3rd reason is the one characteristic of this weapon that gives it the uniqueness that I was talking about earlier. If you have any one of the 3 upgraded variants and you run out of ammo, you will automatically switch back to the base version. And it might sound very simple on paper, but it does change up the gameplay quite a bit, and it makes for a very interesting dynamic where you get to use and experience all different variants in every game you play without being forced to pick and choose which one you want to stick with. You get to use every single version of the wonder weapon for a little bit of time, and that really helps in keeping things more refreshing and more interesting, because you don't have to use the same wonder weapon over and over again, and you don't have to pick one each game. You get to cycle through all of them, and it's implemented very well. However, at times you might see 2 different mod kits on the ground, and now you actually might have to choose. When it comes to the upgraded variants, there's a real lack of balance in the sense that some of them are way better than others, and Treyarch will probably close that gap at some point, but the map just came out and I think it's probably going to be a while before we see that happen. So in this video, we're going to rank the wonder weapon variants from worst to best. The things that I take into consideration are usually pretty standard, but for the sake of clarity, I'm still gonna go through them just so you all know what I usually think about when I'm ranking wonder weapons. So the first thing is damage, and by the way, these are not really in any particular order. The damage per shot is obviously an important factor. A wonder weapon has to be powerful, it has to be strong, which in turn would make it an efficient, viable tool at dealing with the zombies, and the damage output is an indication of that. But there's also no point in doing a lot of damage when you don't have a lot of ammo, so that's another thing to consider. So a good way to figure out if a weapon does great damage and has enough ammo is just to simply multiply the damage output by the amount of ammo and get a total potential damage a weapon can do, and you can compare them that way. More total damage potential means more efficiency. There's also practicality. How easy is it to use the wonder weapon, and how useful is it in different situations? For example, a weapon can kill an entire horde of zombies, but it might not be able to save you when you're cornered. And since the boss zombies in this map are more prominent than usual, I think it's best if we consider how well each variant does against the bosses as well. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and rank them from worst to best. Coming in at number 4, the absolute worst variant is the Diffuser. This is the green colored variant. The non-pack-a-punch version has 30 in the magazine and 30 in reserve, so a total of 60. Every time you pull the trigger, the weapon fires 5 laser beams that travel in a straight line and spread out horizontally, so you get to fire this weapon a total of 12 times before you run out of ammo. For the non-pack-a-punched version, every one of those laser beams does 2,000 damage to zombies, so the total damage potential is 120,000, which is not very good. When you pack-a-punch it once, it becomes the quintessence. It has 40 in the magazine and 40 in reserve, which is a total of 80, so you get to fire this weapon a total of 16 times before running out of ammo. It does 3,000 damage to the zombies, which gives it a total damage potential of 240,000. The double pack-a-punched version does 6,000 damage to the zombies, which makes the total damage potential to equal 480,000. The triple pack-a-punched version does 9,000 damage, which makes the total damage potential to be 720,000. And that might seem like a large number, but it's really not, and you'll see that as we work our way down the list. This variant simply just doesn't do enough. It doesn't do enough damage and it doesn't have a lot of ammo, but it still has its place in the game. It has its purpose. There are a few situations where it's quite useful. If you want to start damaging the zombies when they're still not too close to each other and they're kind of spread out, this weapon does a really good job at that. Most of the time it won't kill the zombies, it'll just damage them, so it covers a lot of ground and it does have a large AoE, but it doesn't do enough. Another situation where this thing is useful is if a Panzer spawns in, you could pop an Ether Shroud and get very, very close to him and start firing, so that way all 5 laser beams hit the Panzer, and that'll basically make him die quicker. And if you're cornered, if you spam shots with this weapon, there is a very good chance that you're gonna get out. Another thing that's kind of important in this map is range. And that's mostly because there are these enemies in this map called Disciples. They're always mid-air, and for the most part, they like to stay away from you and empower the zombies that are spawning in. And it's very important to take those guys out early, so you need to be able to sort of snipe them across the map. And this is a big map, and all the different enemy types have long-range attacks, so it's important to at least be capable of engaging them from a distance. And the Diffuser variant is just not capable of that. If you're trying to take out an enemy that is far away from you, the laser beams spread out, so probably one of the laser beams is gonna connect, but the other 4 are gonna miss. And one laser beam doesn't really do anything to make a significant difference. So overall, it's not entirely terrible, but it's just not very practical and not very efficient, and it comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, we have the Blazer variant, which is the blue-colored version. Non-pack-a-punched, it has 40 in the magazine and 40 in reserve. In terms of damage, it's completely identical to the Diffuser variant, but in terms of practicality, it's completely different. The way this variant works is very simple. You just hold down the trigger and you shoot this continuous laser beam. It kind of behaves like a projectile. And if the weapon is not pack-a-punched, it does 2,000 damage to zombies per shot, so you have a total of 80 shots, which gives it a total damage potential of 160,000. When you pack-a-punch it, it becomes the Enlightenment. You get 50 shots in the magazine and 50 in reserve, which is a total of 100 shots. It does 3,000 damage, just like the Diffuser, but since this one has a total of 100 shots instead of the 80 that the Diffuser has, the total damage potential is 300,000, which is higher than what the Diffuser is able to do. The double pack-a-punched version does 6,000 damage, which gives it a total damage potential of 600,000. The triple pack-a-punched version does 9,000 damage, which makes the total damage potential to be 900,000, which is higher than the 720,000 that the Diffuser is able to do. Now, it might not seem like that big of a difference, but damage is really not the only thing that makes the Blazer variant better than the Diffuser. Sure, you can do damage with both of them, but with the Blazer, you're also more likely to take advantage of that damage potential than with the Diffuser. And that's because the Blazer is much more player-friendly. You have much more control over it. With the Diffuser, you fire 5 shots at the same time. Some of them are gonna hit and some of them are not. It's just not very easy to line up the zombies the right way every time. Sometimes you're gonna miss, and it's inevitable. The Diffuser already doesn't have a lot of ammo, and you're definitely gonna waste waste some too. The Blazer, albeit somewhat generic in design, is much more comfortable to work with, and it has decent range, which does help when dealing with the Disciples. Now, I should mention that it doesn't have as good of a range as I thought it would. I think there's a drop-off when it comes to its range. You can't always snipe the enemies that are very far away, which is kind of weird because it's a straight laser beam and you expect it to be able to keep traveling in that straight line forever, and it doesn't exactly do that all the time. It kind of vanishes after it travels a certain distance. I'm not sure if that's intentional, but it's something to bear in mind when using this weapon. But it does have decent range, which makes dealing with all the different enemy types a lot easier. Now, remember the damage potential we were talking about earlier? Well, what if I told you that you could actually do a lot more damage? That number could actually be a lot higher? Well, because you have more control with this variant than you do with the Diffuser, you're actually able to get headshots. And if you have Deadshot Daiquiri, you get a 100% increase in the initial headshot damage. Plus, you get another extra 10% headshot damage on top of that. So you can basically just camp and get headshots with this weapon. And if you have Deadshot Daiquiri and you have this weapon triple pack-a-punched, you'll do 29,700 initial headshot damage. And we're oversimplifying obviously, but if we used every single shot properly, our total damage potential would be 2,970,000, which is a lot. Now you're probably wondering why I didn't do this earlier with the Diffuser, since you can get headshots with the Diffuser too. Well, the problem is that's probably never gonna happen. With the Diffuser, it's already difficult to not waste any of the shots, and while you will for certain get some headshots with it, you're probably never going to go for headshots because it gives you a much higher chance to entirely miss and not hit anything and waste your shots, which is the number one thing you have to worry about when you're using the Diffuser. With the Blazer, it's perfectly possible to get headshots on every single zombie, and that's why that stat becomes much more of a factor here. So even though the Blazer doesn't do any more damage per shot than the Diffuser does, because it's more practical and easier to control, you get much more out of it. And plus, it has more ammo, and even if they had the exact same amount of ammo, the Blazer would still be superior because of how much easier it is to work with. Coming in at number 2, we have the base version. The base version is kind of overlooked, and it really shouldn't be. It's a lot better than it comes off. Just because it's the non-upgraded base version and it's just a pistol and it looks weak, it shouldn't be dismissed. So don't judge a book by its cover, because this thing is actually pretty good. The non-pack-a-punched version has 25 shots in the magazine and 75 in reserve, which is a total of 100 shots. It does 1500 damage to zombies, so the total damage potential is 150,000. When you pack-a-punch it, it becomes the duality. It gets 50 shots in the magazine and 150 in reserve, so a total of 200 shots. It does 2500 damage to zombies, which makes its total damage potential to be 500,000, which is a really big jump, and that's mostly because when you pack-a-punch it, your ammo doubles, and no other variant does that. When you double pack-a-punch it, it does 5,000 damage to zombies, which gives it 1 million total damage potential. When you triple pack-a-punch it, it does 7,500 damage to zombies, and that makes the total damage potential to be 1,500,000, which is higher than both the Diffuser and the Blazer. It's actually just a little less than the Diffuser and the Blazer combined. And if that's not enough to convince you, well, getting headshots with this one is actually quite easy. So if we do the same calculation that we did with the Blazer earlier, when triple pack-a-punched, we have an initial headshot damage of 24,750, which gives us a total damage potential of 4,950,000, which is absolutely incredible. The good thing about this one is that it's always available, and you'll never have to worry about ammo, at least not as much as you do with the other variants. And not just because it has a lot of ammo. If you have one of the 3 upgraded variants and you pick up ammo for them, it refills the ammo of the base version too. So when you revert back to the base version, you'll probably have full ammo. And that's another big plus when it comes to this weapon. Now, the damage per shot is the lowest, which makes sense since this is the non-upgraded base version. So if you get cornered in that type of situation, you would probably be better off with any of the other variants that's not this one. Now with that being said, 7,500 damage per shot is still really good, considering the Blazer does 9,000 damage and has half the amount of ammo that this one does. And not to mention, the fire rate is also quite good, so if you want to spray and pray, that's a perfectly available option too. It also has great range, so you can easily deal with any bosses from any distance. It's very simple to use. It's actually easier than the Blazer because with this one you can control where every shot goes. With the Blazer you have to hold down the trigger, and sometimes you hold down the trigger a second longer than you have to and you waste some shots. And since the Blazer has a lot less ammo, that becomes much more of an issue for that variant. With the base version, it's harder to waste shots, and even if you do, you can afford to do so because of how much ammo you have. Overall, the base version is really good, and it's surprising that it's better than most upgraded variants, and it comes in at number 2. Coming in at number 1, we have the Swarm. This variant is very different. It really stands out. Non-pack-a-punched, it has 56 shots in the magazine and 56 in reserve. Now, the damage is very difficult to calculate, and that's because every time you pull the trigger and fire this weapon, you shoot 3 missiles twice. So you shoot 6 missiles, which takes 8 shots out of the magazine, and you don't have any control whatsoever over how many missiles you shoot. Every time you pull the trigger, the weapon fires twice, and you lose 8 shots but fire 6 missiles, which is kind of odd. The way this weapon works is just weird, and since the missiles are explosive and they do splash damage, it's pretty much impossible to calculate exactly how much damage it does every time you fire the weapon, or how much damage that would be per ammo count. But what I can tell you is that the missiles, they do a lot of damage. The reason I say that is because when I got to round 50, I used every single variant and the base version, and the only one that was able to do noticeably better was the Swarm variant. And even though it's very difficult to calculate the damage, I still have some rough numbers just so we can get an idea of what it's capable of doing. With the non-pack-a-punched version, you have a total of 112 shots, and since every time you fire the weapon you lose 8, you get to fire this weapon a total of 14 times, which might not seem like that many, but the missiles are explosives, which means they have splash damage, so you can target a horde of zombies and this thing will kill multiple zombies at a time. The splash damage radius is not big enough to kill a horde of zombies, it's actually not even close, but you can kill multiple zombies at a time while damaging some others. The one downside though is that it can make crawlers, but as far as I know, that's also possible with the other variants. They can all make crawlers, but it's just a lot more probable with this variant. Now let's talk about damage. Keep in mind these are very rough estimates, so take them with a grain of salt. For the non-pack-a-punched version, each missile does an average of 2,150 damage on direct impact, and does somewhere between 1,700 to 2,000 splash damage depending on how far away the zombies are from where the missiles land. I'm not going to do a total damage potential for this weapon because it's really hard to tell how many zombies the splash damage is going to affect, and how much damage it's going to do to each zombie. It's not consistent at all, so we're gonna skip that just for this variant. When you pack-a-punch it, it becomes the Seeker. It gets 80 shots in the magazine and 80 in reserve, so a total of 160 shots, which means that you can fire this weapon a total of 20 times before you run out of ammo. Each missile does an average of 3,150 damage on direct impact, and it does somewhere between 2,700 to 3,000 splash damage. When you double pack-a-punch it, each missile does an average of 6,150 damage on direct impact, and it does between 5,500 to 6,000 splash damage. When you triple pack-a-punch it, each missile does an average of 9,150 damage on direct impact, and it does between 8,200 to 9,000 splash damage. So obviously this thing can do damage. But the one feature this variant has that makes it so much better is the tracking feature. So if you ADS, you can lock onto a target and all 6 missiles will hit that one target. And this is especially useful when dealing with the bosses. This map is a little bit boss heavy. There are a lot of different enemy types and the rounds cycle through those enemy types too. So on one round you get a bunch of manglers spawning in all at the same time, and the next round you might get a lot of panzers spawning in. The panzers won't spawn in multiples at a time because, well, they're panzers, they're what nightmares are made of. But they do spawn in, and when you kill one, another one spawns in immediately after. And the Swarm variant is the absolute best when it comes to dealing with the bosses, simply because of how powerful it is, and because the missiles can lock onto a target. So all the damage is concentrated on that one bullet spongy enemy that you hate. It's great at taking out manglers and the panzers, because the explosive damage will easily destroy their armor and take a good chunk out of their health. It has incredible range, so you can take out the disciples with absolute ease, and it's great at killing the zombies as well. And if you get cornered, you can just spam it and it'll get you out. I wish you could have more control over it. For example, since you're firing 6 missiles at a time, it would be nice if you could ADS and target a horde of zombies and each missile would lock onto a single zombie. But unfortunately, you can only target one enemy at a time, which makes me think that this variant was probably designed specifically for dealing with bullet spongy enemy types, and that's probably why there is an abundance of them in this map. And another thing I should mention is that the damage this thing does to boss zombies is scaled depending on what round you're on. So if you look at the damage numbers against the boss zombies on earlier rounds, just know that that's not a real reflection of what this weapon is capable of when it comes to damage output against boss zombies. I wish it was a little bit more consistent, but still, it's really good. The one thing that could seem like it might be an issue is ammo, but when I played with this variant, even on the higher rounds, I never had that problem, and I never had to worry about ammo. You do have to target small hordes of zombies in order to get the most out of it, but as long as you keep targeting different bosses and small hordes of zombies, you shouldn't have to worry about running out of ammo. This variant is an absolute beast. I think it's actually very underrated, and it comes in at number 1. That is gonna do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments section down below what you think of the new Wonder Weapon and its variants. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.